A cold, metallic sun climbs over the English Channel on a brittle morning in October 1943. On the hard-surfaced apron at RAF Bassingbourn, a V formation of silver giants breathe steam and engine fog. B-17 Flying Fortresses, their noses polished, their names painted on the fuselages. Hell's Angels, Memphis Belle, Delta Rebel. Inside each hull, 10 young airmen tighten straps, check guns and maps, and trade short, clipped jokes to keep fear from freezing into their faces. Above them, the bomber stream becomes a living thing, a rolling flank of aluminum, and will cut the sky and aim itself at the industrial heart of Germany. The enemy underestimated this weapon. Not a single plane, but a doctrine. Daylight, precision, massed, heavy bombing carried by the B-17s of the U.S. 8th Air Force. The Reich expects nuisance raids. Instead, it gets relentless, accurate, and visible punishment, and slowly, the facades of cities and defenses crack under the weight of steel and fire. The B-17 Flying Fortress is an American 4-engine heavy bomber, a cathedral of riveted metal. It first flies in July 1935. By the time the United States is fully engaged, the B-17 has matured into the F and G models that form the backbone of daylight strategic bombing. A B-17G spans 103 feet 9 inches and stretches roughly 74 feet in length. Empty, she weighs roughly 36,000 pounds. Normal loaded weight runs in the mid-50,000s, with a maximum load approaching 72,000 pounds. Powered by 4 Wright Cyclone radial engines, a late-model B-17G can reach speeds near 250-287 km/h at altitude and climb to service ceilings over 30,000 feet. Her bomb bay swallows up to 8,000 pounds for shorter missions, though typical deep penetration loads run smaller to preserve range and altitude. Her defensive battery, multiple 50 caliber machine guns in nose, dorsal, ventral, and tail positions, lets groups of fortresses bring overlapping fields of fire to bear on attacking fighters, earning the plane its name, Flying Fortress. What makes the B-17 unique is not one dramatic specification, but the way those specifications combine with doctrine. She is rugged, capable of flying home on 2 engines with giant holes ripped in her wings. Her ability to maintain formation and concentrate defensive fire makes daylight precision possible. When massed into combat boxes, wave after wave, thousands of tons of ordnance become a focusing lance against specific factories and transport nodes, not random terror, but industrial surgery. 8th Air Force crews began daytime raids over occupied Europe in 1942. At first, the Flying Fortress doctrine runs into a hard reality. Without long-range fighter escort, bombers are vulnerable once they pass beyond coastal coverage. The Luftwaffe, alert and precise, slashes into bomber streams with veteran fighter wings and prepares concentrated flak belts over industrial targets. August 17, 1943, the Schweinfurt-Regensburg double raid exposes this brutal truth. On that day, hundreds of B-17s strike ball-bearing factories and production plants deep in the Reich. Losses are staggering. Dozens of B-17s and hundreds of men do not return. 8th Air Force calculates losses that make sustained daylight raids unsustainable until escort fighters can accompany the bombers deep into Germany. The calculation is stark. Without escorts, you trade aircrew for factories at a rate that the Army Air Forces cannot afford. Against flak and fighters, crews learn fast. Formation discipline becomes doctrine. Bombers that peel off are the ones that die. Navigators memorize routes down to hedgerows and river bends. Bombardiers practice the Norden bomb site and learn the terrifying ballet of the bomb run. 3 minutes of exposure where the only thing you can do is fly steady. The human cost is immediate and intimate. A waist gunner's hand shredded by shrapnel, a navigator's headset ripped from his ears when the oxygen system fails, a pilot's voice wobbling as he radios that the ball turret is gone. The planes are stern but unforgiving teachers. Their crews learn to be coldly efficient and fiercely loyal. We linger in a leaking cold belly turret with Sergeant Cecil Scott. He is wedged into the circular cage, his fingers coaxing a ball turret with Kurzum 50 caliber through a jittering sky, his face a mask of concentration. He remembers a mission in May 1943 when flak punched a 60-inch tear under his turret, and he rides the envelope of metal home, every vibration a litany of luck. Or we sit with Captain Robert K. Morgan, pilot of the famed Memphis Belle, 91st Bomb Group, who on 17 May 1943 completes his 25th mission and watches his crew step from their bomber like survivors from a shipwreck. The Belle's crew becomes the symbol, a token of survivability and courage, and they are sent home for a war bond tour while other crews return to the same airfields to fly again. These are not caricatures of heroism. They are exhausted young men with names and ranks and 18-year-old jokes. They scrape ice off their goggles, shove pieces of makeshift leather over leaking seams, and write letters home between sorties. When a B-17 returns limping, the ground crew counts engines, checks transmitters, and in a hush that feels like prayer, the families of the men on board wait for notices that sometimes mercifully say, "All crew safe." Other times they do not. The United States advantage is not only in pilots and planes, but in machines, assembly lines, and organization. By 1944, the U.S. war economy is turning out B-17s at an astonishing pace. Together, Boeing, Douglas, and Vega produce over 12,000 flying fortresses during the war, with production lines running around the clock to deliver F and G models in thousands. This depth of production means the 8th Air Force can absorb losses, rotate crews, and keep pressure on the Reich while simultaneously training replacements back in the United States. The plants: Boeing's Seattle Works, Douglas in Long Beach, Vega in Burbank, are international humming factories, each bomber passing through stations like a clockwork procession. Assembly times, reuse of subcontracting expertise, and a robust logistical chain keep the bomber arm fed. Out of this horsepower comes a new strategic possibility. If the United States can field enough heavy bombers to trade aircraft for industrial capacity, then sustained pressure becomes possible. But the Americans also need another piece of the puzzle: fighter escort that can keep up with the fortresses all the way to the target and back. Schweinfurt, Regensburg, 17 August 1943. It is humid and cloudless when two great bomber streams arc out from England on 17 August. The day's objective is a double strike: Regensburg's Messerschmitt and Schweinfurt's ball-bearing works, paired targets designed to both cripple fighter production and cripple the bearings that keep German industry turning. The first wave rolls in toward Regensburg and, after its bomb run, turns south toward Allied territory. The second wave pushes on toward Schweinfurt and loses the distance argument. Lacking escort, many B-17s are intercepted by concentrated Luftwaffe units that have learned to peel and roll attacks into the bomber boxes. As shells bloom around them and fighters dance through the gaps, the formations hold and the bombers drop their loads on the factories. Yet at mission end, losses are too high. The 8th loses dozens of aircraft and hundreds of crewmen on that single day. The after-action journals are stark. The operation achieves material damage to the target, but at a cost that exposes a flaw in doctrine. Day raids without range escorts are a hollow triumph. The Luftwaffe has hit back hard, and the scale of the losses becomes a call to retool both tactics and technology. Big Week, Operation Argument, 20-25 February 1944. Winter sky and brittle fields see the Allies plan the decisive, jaw-cracking blow to German aircraft industry. Operation Argument, popularly called Big Week, runs 20-25 February 1944. The aim is explicit: force the Luftwaffe into a decisive air battle, destroy fighter production, and win the air war before D-Day. The 8th dispatches massive formations of B-17s and B-24s against aircraft factories, test centers, and assembly plants in Leipzig, Regensburg, and other nodes. Fighter units, now increasingly supported by long-range escorts like the P-51 Mustang fitted with drop tanks, take on the Luftwaffe in pitched, bloody battles. The result is a strategic turning point. The Luftwaffe bleeds pilots and aircraft. While U.S. losses are painful, the Germans cannot replace their veteran cadre at the same rate. The Allies claim significant attrition of German fighters and experienced pilots, and the Allies' ability to maintain daylight bombing becomes more sustainable. The factories, under direct and sustained pressure, falter, and German air defenses begin to show cracks and fewer veteran crews. Big Week thus breaks the back of the Luftwaffe's capacity to stop oil and aircraft production with any reliability. C. Continued campaigns, 1944. Escort arrives. From spring 1944 onward, the arrival of an effective P-51 Mustang Escort changes the calculus. With Merlins and drop tanks, Mustangs escort B-17s all the way to Berlin and back, and German fighter attacks become more costly. Now the bomber stream can reach deep into the Reich with fewer catastrophic losses. Precision strikes hit oil and synthetic fuel plants, rail choke points, and aircraft factories. The strategic weight now works. A combination of sustained bomber pressure and crippling of the Luftwaffe's offensive power means Germany's war machine begins to slow. From the German viewpoint, the sky is becoming a new front. Local air defense commanders, Jagdgeschwader and Luftflotte officers, watch as formations that once relied on night trickery now arrive in daylight as huge, heavily protected bodies. Early misconceptions linger in German high command. At first, they treat the raids as something to be fought by tactical fighter units only. But as raids increase in frequency and scale, and especially after Big Week, radio intercepts and reports from Jagdgeschwader show a different picture. German civilian morale frays in industrial districts where factory windows trade light for glass shards and where worker dormitories and forced labor camps are not spared. Memoirs and captured documents later show the shock, not only at the physical destruction, but at the psychological effect. Cities that thought themselves shielded by geography now feel surrounded by steel. The Reich's propaganda organs attempt to spin the raids into stoic endurance, but German industrial leaders like Albert Speer register the damage in private memos and plead for dispersal and camouflage. The result is a cascade of measures: decentralization of production, hurried dispersals, and an anxious reallocation of transport resources, measures that reduce efficiency and lengthen production times. Leadership on the Allied side adapts quickly. Men like Major General Ira C. Eaker and, later, Major General James "Jimmy" Doolittle reshape doctrine. Eaker, who helps form the early 8th Air Force campaigns, emphasizes mass and discipline in formations. Doolittle, who takes over 8th in January 1944, presses to win the air war through coordination and combined operations. Command channels harmonize bomber and fighter doctrine. Fighters must stop treating escort as a handshake and start treating it as a theater-wide commitment. The appointment of Doolittle and the coordination with RAF night operations and strategic targeting priorities signal that air power will be the spear tip of Allied strategic effort. Tactically, commanders refine the combat box, staggered altitude profiles, and radio procedures to minimize collisions and maximize mutual defensive fire. Crews practice the dreaded bomb run timed to the second, with the lead aircraft's bombardier, sometimes a captain like Vincent Evans of the Memphis Belle, taking control of the formation along the final moments. Intelligence officers refine target lists, favoring synthetic fuel and aircraft production because those targets have multiplier effects. Each bomber or factory lost undermines multiple weapon systems downstream. Logistics officers in turn ensure that replacement planes and crews flow into the 8th as needed, and that maintenance crews on the ground can reassemble cannibalized aircraft with desperate efficiency.